Right now, someone is telling you what to think. Not with a sword, not with chains, with a logo, a headline, a flag, a feed curated so precisely that you barely notice the walls being built around your mind. And the strangest part is that this is not new. The method you are experiencing right now, the one that shapes your opinions, directs your fear, and manufactures your loyalty, has been running for at least 5,000 years. Every empire that ever existed on this planet figured it out. Rome figured it out. The Mongols figured it out. The British figured it out. And whoever is in power right now, they never stopped using it. This is not a conspiracy. This is history. And once you see the pattern, you will not be able to unsee it. You are born without beliefs. That is the first thing to understand. Your brain arrives empty of ideology. It has no preferred flag, no built-in God, no default loyalty to any king or country. What it does have is a hunger, a deep, ancient need to belong, to feel safe, and to make sense of a chaotic world. Every empire in history exploited that hunger, and they all used the same 6 tools to do it. The first tool is fear. Not random fear, engineered fear, directed at a specific target, given a name, a face, a group. In ancient Assyria, scribes carved detailed accounts of conquered peoples being skinned alive. Not because it always happened, but because the story spread. Historian Mario Liverani studied Assyrian royal inscriptions extensively and found that the language of terror was highly formulaic, almost like a script. The enemy is always monstrous. The enemy is always threatening your family. The enemy is always almost here. Your brain cannot distinguish between a threat that is real and a threat that is vividly described. That is not a flaw. That was survival. In a world where predators existed, a brain that panicked at a convincing story was better than one that waited for proof. Empires inherited that brain. They just replaced the lion with a neighbor. The second tool is identity. You are not just a person. You are a Roman. You are a citizen of the Tang dynasty. You are English. You are chosen. The moment an empire gives you a group identity, it gives you 2 things simultaneously: a reason to feel pride and a reason to feel threatened. Psychologist Henry Tajfel ran what became known as the minimal group paradigm in the 1970s. He divided strangers into arbitrary groups, sometimes based on nothing more than a preference for a painter, and found that within minutes, people began favoring their group over the other, even when there was no material benefit. They had just met. They shared nothing. But the group was enough. Empires knew this intuitively thousands of years before Tajfel gave it a name. Give people a tribe. Tell them the tribe is great. Tell them the other tribe is dangerous. That is all you need. The third tool is sacred narrative. Every empire becomes eternal by rewriting time. The founding story is always a miracle. The rulers are always descended from gods, or chosen by them, or protected by them. Ancient Egypt did not have a pharaoh who was politically convenient. It had a living god who held back chaos itself. The Chinese emperor was the son of heaven, the singular point through which divine order flowed into the human world. The Roman emperor was deified after death, and sometimes before it. These were not naive beliefs held by stupid people. They were carefully maintained systems. Temples were built. Priests were paid. Calendars were organized around festivals that reinforced the myth. The sacred narrative does something that no army can do. It makes obedience feel righteous. You do not bow to a man. You bow to the order of the universe. The fourth tool is information control. This one is older than the printing press by millennia. In ancient China, the Qin dynasty, which unified China in 221 BCE, famously burned books. Not all books, specific books. Books that promoted competing political philosophies. Books that glorified rival dynasties. Books that gave people frameworks for thinking outside the state's preferred worldview. Scholar Greet Vankerbergen has written about how the Han dynasty that followed did the same thing in reverse. Not by destroying texts, but by sponsoring specific ones, elevating Confucian thought precisely because its emphasis on hierarchy and filial piety aligned with centralized rule. You do not need to burn every dangerous idea. You only need to make it invisible. Flood the space with the ideas you want, and the others drown on their own. The fifth tool is spectacle. Bread and circuses. That phrase comes from the Roman poet Juvenal, writing in the late 1st century CE, describing how the Roman population had traded political engagement for food and entertainment. But spectacle goes much deeper than distraction. Historian Paul Vane argued that Roman public games were not merely diversions. They were enactments of the social order. When the emperor sat in the highest seat, and the crowds arranged themselves below him by rank, and the gladiators bled on the sand, the entire population was rehearsing its own hierarchy. Watching was participation. Presence was compliance. The spectacle did not just distract from power. It was power, performed in public every single week. Today, the arenas are digital. The seats are screens. But the function has not changed. The sixth tool is reward and punishment made visible. Not just applied, displayed. Assyrian kings did not hide their conquests. They carved them into palace walls in enormous detail, specifically to be seen by visiting dignitaries and ambassadors. Roman emperors held triumphs, massive public parades where the defeated were marched through the streets in chains. The message was never just for the defeated, it was for everyone watching. Your brain runs a constant social calculation. Where is the danger? Where is the reward? Who has power here? Visible punishment recalibrates that calculation instantly and without argument. You do not need to threaten everyone. You only need to make an example of enough people that everyone else does the math themselves. Now, here is what should stop you cold. Every single one of those 6 tools is in active use right now. The engineered threat is still here. The face and name change, but the neurological function is identical. The tribal identity is still here. Sorted now by politics, culture war, brand loyalty, geographic identity. The sacred narrative is still here, dressed in the language of nations, of historical destiny, of movements that are always on the right side of history. Information control is still here, not always through burning, but through amplification, through algorithmic sorting, through the deliberate burial of inconvenient facts under an avalanche of preferred ones. Spectacle is still here, louder, faster, more addictive than anything Rome ever produced. And visible punishment is still here, played out in real time, on shared screens, designed to teach everyone watching where the line is. None of this means you are helpless. The reason empires spent so much energy on these 6 tools is that none of them work permanently. They require constant maintenance. The fear has to be refreshed. The identity has to be reinforced. The narrative has to be updated. The information environment has to be actively managed. Empires that stopped doing this maintenance, Rome in its final centuries, the British Empire after the Second World War, the Soviet Union when it could no longer afford the spectacle, did not survive the silence that followed. Awareness is not the same as immunity. Knowing that you are being nudged toward fear does not make you fearless. Knowing your group identity is partially constructed does not dissolve it. The tools work on the same ancient hardware regardless of your education. But knowledge does create friction. It slows the reflex. It inserts a half second between stimulus and belief. And in that half second, something different becomes possible. You started this video in the middle of a system that is 5,000 years old. That has not changed. But now you can feel the edges of it. And the thing about a cage you can feel is that you can also look for the door. That is the same thought you walked in with. That someone is telling you what to think. It has not stopped being true. But now you know exactly how long it has been true, and exactly how they do it. What you do with that is the only part that has ever actually been yours.